Some of the models we have upstairs were actually modeled by J.B. I think some before he went blind and maybe a few right after he went blind. He also had a rivet lathe, and that mechanism on the top there is what drives the lathe. That lathe is now also in the replication of his workshop upstairs. You can see that in a few minutes. These are the models for the America's Cup. The Vigilant, 1893. She was rather shallow because the launching ways here weren't very deep, and so she had a centerboard. But by the time he went to the Defender in 1895, he'd made the ways deeper, and so he could have a regular deep keel there. This is Columbia, won twice, 1899, 1901. This, by the way, is the Columbia dinghy, a famous dinghy shape of which many models were built, lap strake. This was the Constitution, built to be the Defender in 1901, but the problem was, with the immense skill of Captain Barr sailing the Columbia, she beat out the new boat and defended the Cup a second time. Then there's the great Reliance, 144 feet on deck, 201 feet 6 inches from the end of the bowsprit to the end of the boom, and 72 in the crew. After that, the New York Yacht Club got Captain Nat to change the rating rule with what became known as the Universal Rule, which governed the America's Cup through the J class time. And since Captain Nat had devised the rule, he was probably the most skillful at cheating it, and his boat, Resolute, which he designed in 1914, won the Cup in 1920. This is a picture of my late father, Sid Herreshoff, in the original model room, and he's standing behind a sailing model. And we've lately, here at the museum, become friendly with the radio control model boat people, who also sometimes sail models competitively with vane steering. And they were absolutely fascinated that Captain Nat invented the vane steering in the 1920s when he made these models, and you can see that in the model room. And it's just an example of his technique. Whenever there was a need to come up with some innovation, he did it, and they always worked. So this is the way we had the models in my father's house. Captain Nat's portrait there, and around it a lot of the very important boats, including the America's Cup boats to the right of the portrait, and some sailing models, some of which are here. And these models placed in very logical fashion. What my father did in 1954 was he cut out from shirt cardboard little tiny outlines of all these models and arranged them on model replications of the walls, so that he got them to be in the most interesting possible juxtaposition with certain classes like the Sonda boats, demonstrating how they developed and got more and more extreme. And by the way, these are models of boats which were fin keelers. The fin keels were often bronze plates with a lead bow. And a lot of young people who sail today think that the fin keel arrangement was an invention of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, but in actual fact, Captain Nat built about 50 of those kinds of boats in the 1890s. They weren't so good once the Universal Rule came in, and that's probably the reason more than anything else that he abandoned doing that. And this is the way things were in our model room in the house that I live in today. And my father was always one to be doing things much like his father. And when I was working at MIT redesigning their model tank, I asked my father if he'd make a nice model for me to test. So he made this one, which is rather similar to the famous Lyrian form or Newport 29 form. And we used that for a lot of the model testing development at MIT. My father also went to MIT, so I was the first one, the third generation of the family to attend MIT. This is my father, A. Sidney DeWolf Herreshoff, and here he is looking at some models that I'd made for boats that I had built or built myself around here. And I like this charming picture of my dad showing young Johnny Watson, aged 7, one of Captain Nat's sailing models. My father was a man of few words, but when he got talking about the boats and how they did things, he was great. We had a visit back in the 1950s of Captain Irving Johnson and his wife, who came in the Yankee. They were the couple that sailed around the world about 6 times with young people. And the town was abuzz that the famous Captain Johnson was here, but they couldn't find him on 4th of July. It happened, his birthday was on 4th of July. It was his 50th birthday, and nobody could find him because he spent the entire day in the model room with my father looking at probably every model that was there. Well, now I'm going to show you a little bit about how we make models, and I think for that purpose I'm going to first of all go around the table here and show you some of the tools. As I've said, Captain Nat would have in his mind's eye what he was going to produce. And this is an example. This is a model I made one time back, a boat we built. But you sort of have in your mind what it's going to be, but not totally, because as it develops in front of you, you may want to change what you originally thought a little bit. It's a little bit like Captain Nat going around to the shop and making a little sketch of a change. One of the problems, of course, is while you're building the model, you need to measure the preliminary shapes in such a way that you can calculate the displacement and centers of gravity. And when I do that, I have to do it 2 or 3 times. I think Captain Nat probably just did it once because he had such a sense of judgment that he could quickly go from his first measurement to what the result would likely be. So what tools do we use? Well, first of all, you've got to do something pretty rough and cut out from the big block of wood the basic shape. And then for the first part of the work, we use a drawing knife, which is this formidable looking tool. You put 2 hands on it and draw it forward. And that's a very quick way with a razor sharp edge of getting a lot of the meat off the piece of wood into the basic form of the model. And then the next step is to use some planes. This is a steel block plane, and here's a wooden block plane. And that's very useful in doing the primary shaping of a lot of the boat, because you can like go along here and get a lot of this material out of the way and maybe get the deck line done. And then the next thing is you go to using chisels. And these are something that I brought down here because I hate to take anything out of our model room. And but these examples of the different shapes of chisels. And when you visit the model room in a few minutes, you'll see we have a wonderful chest